Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner with the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we look into the passion projects that are uniting a North Shore community. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. To tell us more about these projects and the community behind them, I'm joined again by reporter Terry Caddo. Terry, thanks for joining us on episode 27 of Northlandia.
Over 6 months, here we go. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Terry, we recently, just 2 episodes ago, had a story on the great Lakes Candy Kitchen with the bear trail up in Knife River, but now we're going back up there yet again. So what brings us to Knife River once again?
Well, I gotta tell you, this month's Northlandia story did not come together really simply. Some weeks, you get an idea for a story, you call people, they tell you other people to call, and it comes together within a matter of hours. Last week, I tried throwing a lot of things at the wall to see if they would stick, because none of my other options were working out, and it just... So I got to the point where I had this idea. I called Paul von Gertz, who is one of the main people to call when you're dealing with anything Knife River. And he answered his phone, and I went, great, this is the time, we're going to do it. I felt a little bad that we just did a Knife River story, now we're doing another one right away, but I don't think they mind. I think they're totally fine with that.
No, I don't think they mind at all.
So he answered the phone. And also, I was pretty familiar with Knife River because I used to be the reporter for one of the reporters for the Lake County News Chronicle. Mm-hmm. And so I was actually at the meeting where they discussed one of the 2 projects that they finished up within the past few years, the Depot project, which we will get into later.
Mm-hmm. So, Terrence, I understand, obviously you went through some different story changes and adjustments before you landed on this one for this particular entry in the column in the podcast. But from my understanding, the story changed from its initial premise. So tell me more about why that happened, what was the initial premise, and where did it ended up at?
So the first idea was to kind of focus in a little bit on Paul and talk about all the different ways he's connected in the community and the way that he gets involved. But as you could possibly imagine, he's a little bit self-effacing. He doesn't really want the attention to be about him. He wants it to be about the community. So I said, okay, well, tell me about these community projects that have been done within the past few years. And so we focused more on that. We focused more on some of the people who led these projects and a little bit on his involvement with them, because he definitely was a voice in making them happen and making sure people knew what was going on with the projects, why they were important, what all was entailed, and how much things would cost, everything like that. So he was definitely highly involved. And then we talked about 2 other individuals who were really leaders for these projects.
So tell me about these projects. What exactly are the projects that you guys were talking about up in Knife River?
So the first one is the restoration of the Knife River Depot. It's a train depot that was built around 1900 or so, originally built in and around the Lester community in Duluth, but it got moved up to Knife River shortly after I want to say, I'm not 100% sure. I want to say it's after 1900 at least. And it had been there for years and years and years. And the leader of that project, Larry Ronning, actually remembers being a kid and taking the train to and from, I believe, Duluth or maybe 2 harbors, using that depot. And so he remembered that, obviously, as train travel wasn't as popular for a few years, for several years there, the depot was disused. It just kind of sat there. And so eventually there were plans to tear it down, and he didn't like that idea. Larry was very passionate about it. He wanted to see it last another 100 years in that community. So he and other folks in Knife River, it took a lot of volunteers, a lot of work, a lot of hours, and they made a full restoration of that depot from 2018 when they first had that first meeting that I was at talking about it, all the way through, I want to say 2020, 2021, I think was maybe they were finishing up a couple last things, but 2020 or so, a bunch of volunteers got together and just made the restoration happen. It's repainted, it's got a new foundation, it's got new windows, it's got everything it kind of needs to last another 100 years like he had planned.
Mm-hmm. How many volunteers do you reckon helped out? Like, we talking
a
lot. A dozen, hundreds? I'm not sure how big the population of Knife River is.
Well, it's hard to say. They didn't give me an exact number, but definitely there are people who were there every day working on it, and there were people who maybe went and did a couple of things on the project. I know Larry did a lot. He did most of the window restorations using some recycled cedar that he got from tearing apart and redoing a deck in the area, because he's a retired contractor, so he had the know-how. He knew what he was doing when it came to doing this project, and he thought, okay, we can do this. We can make this happen. And that's something that Paul kind of talked a lot about, is how there are people in that community up there who know how to get things done. And so they're able to lead this project.
Some of these, like I am, about the depot and Crusader. And so we had some really good leadership with each of these initiatives. People very passionate about what they were doing. I mean, for example, Larry Ryan is a retired contractor, but he's born in Knife River here, and he remembers as a child riding the train from Knife River to Harbors for a quarter. You know, and so he was a contractor, and so he's the one that really saved the depot.
So with that all being done now, how did it all turn out? How does it look? And as you understand, you went up there and you got to see it, the finished product for yourself.
I'd seen it before because I've been up there for Julebien. Oh, I hope I said that correctly. It's a Norwegian Christmas festival they have up there in Knife River. So they had that ready for Julebien at least last year, if not 2 years ago. But it's really pretty. It's got this very nice blue and red aesthetic to it. It's got a new roof. It's very fun to kind of look at and definitely see some of the changes and things that they did to it. It's really fun seeing, for example, Larry pointed out the chimney in the building, because apparently that's the original chimney and everything. The term he used is it was plumb, so it was fine. It was usable, so they just reused it, and yeah, it was cool.
So the chimney remained. What was the most notable change from how it was?
The outside.
Yeah.
You can see a photo in the story of what it looked like kind of before and what it looked like afterwards, and it was quite the transformation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea how well visited it is now?
Well, one thing I will say about it is it's kind of set up to be more of a visit on your own. They have like a bunch of information up on the wall so you can take a look at things, but it's definitely kind of a more self-guided tour type of place.
Gotcha. So it's not really like they take an attendance or anything. It just kind of...
As far as I've seen, no.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe on events where they've had people staffing it, like they sometimes do train events with the North Shore Scenic Railroad, I believe, or they also do a lot of stuff on their own with the, as I said, Julebien before. They definitely have people go over there and they could ride I believe they could ride the troll train is what it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I know Dan Williamson put together a video of the troll train. Yeah. So check that out if you want to see the troll train for yourself.
And that's where you get on the troll train, is at the depot.
Mm-hmm. So is the self-guidedness, is it kind of like that makes me think of the Toynbee School a little bit, with like you have the stop there and then there's kind of just some placards on the outside and you can kind of wander the grounds a little bit if you want. Kind of like that, but maybe more involved with the inside.
Yeah, definitely more involved on the inside. But there's plenty of information that you can see. They also put up a bunch of placards this year for the other project that we're going to get into pretty quick.
So now that you mentioned that other project, tell me first off, what is the other project?
So it is a wooden fishing boat called the Crusader II. It is well known for a couple of reasons. The fact that it sat at Lighthouse Point in Two Harbors for like 30 plus years. And also it was a fishing boat that was based out of Knife River for several years. It was built by the Hill family in Larsmont in 1939. So what's notable about the Crusader II is that it was christened by Crown Prince Olaf of Norway when he was visiting the area back in 1939. So it's kind of a noteworthy boat. It's existed for not quite 100 years, but getting there. It'll be there before we know it, since it was built in 1939. And what's really neat about it is the person who's been kind of leading the project on that, well, co-leading the project on that, because Larry Roning's involved with that as well, is Doug Hill, who is the grandson of the original boat maker. And so he and his uncle had come up last year to visit the area just on vacation. He lives in Florida most of his life, and they came up and they toured the area. They heard about the boat, and he decided to spend his entire summer this summer coming up and working on restoring that boat.
Another one I want to point out is a fellow by the name of Doug Hill. Now, in Larsmont, there was a family called Hill that built over 200 wood boats, mostly fishing boats on the North Shore. Well, Doug Hill's family, actually his grandfather, built the Crusader, which is the boat here now. Well, he lives in Florida, but he's given up his whole summer. He's living in a fifth wheel here right on our property to restore the boat. And that's the kind of passion and skills that applied perfectly for the rebuild of the boat.
Interesting. And if you're wanting to know more about the visit from Norwegian royalty, there actually was an episode of the Superior Telegram's history podcast, Archive Dive. Maria Lockwood talked more in depth with Teddy Moronic about that particular visit. But back to this story. So how long ago did they start this restoration process, and what's kind of their hopeful timeline for when they kind of think they'll maybe hopefully have it done?
Maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe, hopefully, because there's always that room for
That's
error.
fair.
That's
fair. That's definitely a thing. I will say they started working on this. Technically, the work on this has been going on for a while now because they've had plans to do this ever since they proposed doing the work at the Knife River Depot. Which is also called the Knife River Heritage and Cultural Center. That was in the original plans that they would build a cradle for this boat and have it on display since the beginning. So that's been the plans for a while now. But the actual restoration work, I believe, got into full swing around May of this year. In fact, I will say Doug was very enthusiastic, and he had reached out to them saying, "Hey, I'd love to come up in early March." And they're like, no, it's not quite. Especially this spring, they were like, we're not quite ready. The snow's not gone this year.
Oh no, I didn't go away for quite a while.
No. So he was like, okay, maybe we'll wait. And even by May, they said that it took a couple of weeks for them to get kind of going with it because they were still dealing with a lot of stuff. But they've been in the swing for a while. He's using the tools that his grandfather had that originally worked on this boat even, and techniques that he learned from him because they spent time building boats together when he was a kid. And he's been enjoying himself. And as for when they plan to have it done, so you can go and visit it right now. They've got all the information up about it that you'd want to know about it. You can look at it. Can't go in it. It's not one of those things, but you can definitely look in it and see what it looks like and learn about it and its importance to Knife River and the area. And so it's pretty much good to go. They just may be still working on it. So as Paul said, don't distract Doug. Let him do his work.
Don't wave and say hi while he's working.
I mean, you could talk to him a little, but don't take up too much of his. He's concentrating.
So what's their eventual plan with it? Is it just to kind of have it there on display for people to just come and look at, or
something for people to come and look at? I mean, they've got plans for even yet another boat, but I'm not going to get into that because I don't want to. But they've got a couple of things on display there, and they're gonna keep going, keep building.
And so with both of these projects, one, I mean, you talked about the volunteering and such, but how has the community gotten involved with both of these projects, and what kind of impact do you think the projects themselves have on the community? So it's kind of like the cyclical, like, community impacting the projects and then the projects potentially impacting the community.
I mean, they've been involved. Knife River is kind of unique in that people there are very, very passionate about their projects. They wouldn't have been possible for them to get this done without everyone being on board and saying, yeah, let's get this going. I'm willing to volunteer, or I can spend my time. Paul even talks a little bit about how they're a community of retirees, but retirees who, not all retirees, but in a large part of retirees, but retirees who have spark left in them, who still want to get involved in projects and see things improve their community and draw more. And that's draw more visitors, which is, I think, part of the motivation for this project is to draw people in, to say, stop and take a look at Knife River, see what it's like, but also to provide that history for people who live there too, so they can look back and see where they came from. And yeah, I think people have been very much on board. Otherwise, again, it wouldn't have been possible, I don't think.
And beyond being a work ethic, there's a sense of community. Everybody helps each other. And so that all goes, kind of hand in hand. A lot of people with business and administrative experience and people skills. So you put the two together, and you've got a pretty dynamic community.
So I was reading through your notes for me leading to this podcast and such. There was mention about a newsletter that Paul used to put out. So talk to me about
still puts out to this day.
What is this newsletter, and how does that relate to what's going on here?
About once a month or so. I believe it's once a month. Maybe it's a little bit of space in between. I will check my email and I will see a newsletter from Paul in Knife River, and it'll detail some bits of history about Knife River, some interesting facts. And I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. I would have never known that. And he goes through a lot of details of how and why different things are important to Knife River, where the history came from, and a lot of just like fun facts that you never would have known otherwise. And he does a really good job of giving updates about how the Depot project was going when that was going on. A lot of notes about how the Crusader project is going. And he's just really good at like getting people's attention and writing very clearly about like how things are and why they're important, why they matter. And he definitely has been building a community. He said he started out with that newsletter in 2019 as just a way to keep people informed of what was going on. And he started with 40 emails, and now he has a list of, I believe, over 200 or 300 emails. So
wow.
he's been building that community up for sure. People will reach out to him and say, hey, I get the newsletter, but my cousin over here doesn't, and he'd like to know what's happening here. So he's definitely an integral part of the community in that he tells people what's happening there.
So I started the newsletter in May of 2019, I think it was, and primarily to keep stakeholders informed, and of course with a foundation message too. But since then, it's become more of a kind of a community newspaper. A lot of news in it that people enjoy. I always have a feature in there on or at least one or two on some interesting history here. But I'm also developing a sense of community with this too.
So Terry, as I often like to ask at the end of the every podcast episode, why do you think this story, these projects fit in Northlandia?
I think the big thing is the fact that they happened. I don't want to be too cynical about this, but having done this job for just short of 10 years
talk
now.
about cynical. I use the phrase maybe, hopefully.
I mean, but I think that was inspired. Having done this job for just under 10 years now, 10 years in October. Woo. I will say you sometimes go to meetings where people have great ideas for community projects or things that they want to see happen and go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. That's exciting. I'm glad to see. I'm going to go see this when this is done. This is exciting. And then maybe you don't hear another update about it for a while. And eventually you think, oh, I should check in. What's happening with that project? And there's been like some progress, maybe not as much as they'd hoped, or the funding didn't come through, or like maybe the person who was passionate about it needed to step away. And so it just kind of doesn't always come together. In this case, being at that meeting where they started talking about it and their plans and how they were going to make it happen, and seeing it all the way through and being able to go in there and see all the work that they've put into this place, it's pretty impressive. It's the fact that it happened is what makes it kind of unique, and it's fun to see. And I think it's worth a trip to if you've never been there before.
Mm-hmm. And as you wrote in your headline, and as we talked about here, in a way, it's like united the community as well, especially when, it's a smaller area. It's not like it's the size of Duluth or anything.
No, it is definitely not.
It's a smaller area. That
said, I will say, as the Lake County News Chronicle reporter, I whenever I had a story that took place in Knife River, I was like, oh, good, I get to go to Knife River. They're fun there. Going to their national night out party is really fun, or going to visit them when they're doing all kinds of different things. I'm like, oh, exciting. Okay. They're just they had that reputation.
Mm-hmm. All right, Terry. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you again so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us on this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, as well as see photos, visit DuluthNewstribune.com/topics/Northlandia. You can find all the episodes of Northlandia on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you or someone you know has a unique story that you believe can have a place here in Northlandia, let us know by emailing northlandia@duluthnews.com. Join us again next week and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're not in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.